What if the secret to undermining a government wasn't sabotage in the traditional sense, not explosions, not espionage, but something much simpler, insisting everything goes through the proper channels, holding long meetings, referring decisions to committees? It might sound familiar, and those aren't criticisms of modern-day politics. They're instructions from a wartime intelligence manual.
In 1944, during the Second World War, the United States Office of Strategic Services, the body that ultimately went on to become the CIA, produced a document. It was called Simple Sabotage. It wasn't aimed at trained agents, it was written for ordinary people, citizens living under occupation. And it set out how they could quietly disrupt enemy operations in plain sight. Not with complex tools, but with everyday behavior.
System doing everything through channels. Refer all matters to committees. The larger, the better. Bring up irrelevant issues. Promote ineffective workers.
The idea was simple. Small acts carried out by many people could collectively slow down an entire system, waste time, create confusion, undermine efficiency, and in doing so, weaken the enemy from within.
What's striking about the document isn't just what it includes, it's what it redefines.
The manual doesn't just talk about damaging equipment or infrastructure. It focuses heavily on what it calls the human element. Now that means behavior, decision-making, workplace culture, how people interact inside organizations.
Make faulty decisions, adopt a non-cooperative attitude, induce others to follow suit.
In other words, sabotage doesn't have to look like sabotage. It can look like inefficiency or delay, or simply things not quite working as they should.
And that's where it starts to feel perhaps uncomfortably familiar.
When you strip away the wartime context, some of these behaviours resemble things people often associate with modern bureaucracy. Long processes, layers of approval, meetings about meetings.
Now, to be clear, those systems exist for a reason. In places like the Isle of Man, government decisions go through scrutiny in Tynwald, the island's parliament, and that includes what are known as the branches, the House of Keys, made up of elected members, and the Legislative Council, the scrutiny body which reviews legislation. Proposals are debated, amended, and often sent to committees, which are smaller groups of members who examine issues in detail before decisions are made. And it's designed to ensure accountability and to avoid rushed or poorly considered decisions.
But critics sometimes argue that those same processes can slow things down. Policies can take time to move forward. Decisions can be revisited. And responsibility can feel spread out.
Things do take forever. And you have to be persistent and you have to keep raising matters if you're not a member of the government. If you are a member of the government, you've got the opportunity to be at the table and hopefully influence that way.
David Cretney is a former MHK in which he served as both a backbencher and government minister for a lengthy period of time.
I think it's important that decisions are properly thought through, that they're fact-based rather than anything else. And so there will be attention there. There will be time required. But it becomes a bit farcical sometimes, the amount of time that things can be discussed and still make no progress on.
So I suppose it's trying to get that balance right. I mean, looking back, do you think the system generally gets that balance right, or are there times where things become too slow?
Things sometimes do come too slow. We have made progress, and one of the things we boast about as a parliament is we have the opportunity to be nimble. We have the opportunity to make decisions and to get on with things because of our autonomy.
So, is that just the reality of democratic government? Or does it echo something deeper about how organisations behave?
To understand that, we need to step back because the simple sabotage manual assumes something quite specific. That inefficiency is deliberate. That it's something people choose to do, but modern thinking suggests something different.
In large organisations, whether governments, corporations or institutions, inefficiency often isn't planned. It emerges from risk-aversion, from complex rules, from the need to balance competing priorities.
It happens for the best of reasons. It generally doesn't all happen in a big rush or all of a sudden. What happens is things go wrong. Committees investigate the things that have gone wrong, or officers will investigate a thing that's gone wrong, and they will come forward with a list of recommendations. And certainly if they are a committee of Tynwald, that committee isn't worth its salt if it hasn't provided half a dozen solid recommendations of things that must be changed.
Phil Gawne is a former MHK and held various ministerial roles in his time within Tynwald. He's also Manx Radio's political correspondent.
It is very rare that they come up with a recommendation that says, actually, the process is far too clunky and we need to streamline it. What they tend to say is, this new thing that's just happened, to stop this happening again, we need a whole set of rules, and we'll introduce these rules, and that will stop this thing ever happening again. And sure enough, in most cases, that thing is stopped from happening ever again. But also, the other parts of the area that thing might have been in, they start to become more difficult to achieve because a whole set of new rules have been introduced to stop the embarrassing thing happening again.
And we're exploring this idea that behaviours intended to protect systems, like caution or scrutiny, can sometimes slow them down. Do you think that resonates with your experience?
Well, absolutely. Very clearly it is the case that the systems of government slow processes down, and to a certain extent, some of the processes of government are designed to slow things down. So, for example, it's not directly government, but Parliament, Tynwald, House of Keys, Legco, the processes in there are designed to slow things down so that people, our politicians, have the opportunity to carefully consider the impact of whatever the thing is that they're trying to do. And there's a fair amount of sense in that. You can't rush. Well, you're not supposed to rush a bill through. You can actually rush bills through by suspending standing orders, but the general process is designed so that there is plenty of time to consider the implications. There is plenty of time for the public to find out that the bill's going through, to give feedback to members so that it makes sure that you have good legislation. Unfortunately, some of the good processes for lawmaking seem to have kind of shifted over into general government decision making. So you have these very, very elaborate processes which involve everybody's view being taken. Then a response needs to be created for everybody who's submitted a view, and then those responses generally, if they're to be meaningful, they have to have some kind of weight attached to them, so they have to do something, and that then means that you are in sort of general terms, you are making the process slower. You may end up with better results, but the general view is that anything designed by a committee is less likely to be innovative than if it's designed by someone who's an innovative person.
Do you think it's possible to simplify systems without losing accountability, or do you think that's always a trade-off?
There is a trade-off, certainly, but I think sometimes. Well, I not only think it. I'm almost certain that it is the case. The balance has gone far too far in the direction of accountability now, to the extent that it is reasonably well known that government projects cost between 25 and in some cases 50% more than if they were done by the private sector, purely because there's a whole load of elements in there to make sure that it's a fair and transparent process in which government is spending its money. So more work has to be done than if it was a private sector piece of work where the accountability is just to the shareholders, not the whole population of the island.
If you were, briefly, if you were designing a system today, what would you be doing differently to strike that balance?
And of course, that's the $1,000,000 question, isn't it? If we had the answer to that, we would be, the world would be a much better place. I think members of Tynwald need to be much bolder and much more willing to take responsibility for things which inevitably will go wrong. They have to be prepared to accept that mistakes will be made, and you just have to accept that someone's going to be blamed. Most likely it'll be the minister or the political member responsible, and you've got to live with that. But by living with that, potentially you're going to get an awful lot more done than carrying on with the belt and braces approach that makes sure that all known risk is managed out of a project, and the inevitable delays and cost that comes with that.
And just lastly, there's a line in the wartime manual that suggests slowing things down through process and delay can weaken a system. Do you think that modern systems ever do that unintentionally?
I not only think that is the case, but I also think they do it intentionally at times too. If there's a really difficult issue a good example, now this is perhaps me being overly political here on something, but a good example is the assisted dying bill. UK government clearly doesn't want the embarrassment of having two other jurisdictions within its neighbourhood allowing assisted dying, where it still hasn't managed to get the law in place. If I were a minister in Westminster not wanting something to proceed like this, I would be thinking, well, we'll sit on it for a year. We'll let them know when there's not really enough time for them to do anything about it. There'll be an election will come up, and it'll potentially be years before anything happens. Now, I may be being grossly unfair on the various UK politicians involved in this, but I know at times where Council of Ministers that I've been in, and indeed me as a minister, have taken this approach to say, actually, this is a really difficult problem. Let's just sit on it for a while and allow it to sort of time itself out, so that we don't have to deal with it. That does happen in politics, no doubt.
In other words, What the OSS described as sabotage might, in some cases, just be what happens when systems become complicated.
So, is it fair to draw a line between a wartime sabotage manual and modern government systems? Probably not directly. One was designed to weaken systems, the other is designed to make them accountable.
The comparison does raise an interesting question. If the same behaviours can exist in both contexts, how do you tell the difference between a system that's been undermined and a system that's simply struggling under its own weight?
The Simple Sabotage Manual was written more than 80 years ago, a wartime guide to quietly disrupting governments and organisations from within. Today, it reads very differently though. Not as a call to action, but something closer to a mirror.
Not because anyone is deliberately sabotaging anything, but because complex systems left unchecked have a tendency to slow themselves down, to overcomplicate, to get in their own way.
And perhaps the real question isn't whether modern government resembles sabotage, but whether it's possible to build systems that don't.
Thank you for making it to the end of the Manx Radio newscast. You are obviously someone with exquisite taste. May I politely suggest you might want to subscribe to this and a wide range of Manx Radio podcasts at your favourite podcast provider, so our best bits will magically appear on your smartphone. Thank you.